Hi, good afternoon. My name is David Jennings. I work in UCD in the Centre for Teaching and Learning. I'm very happy to actually put forward an example of my work in regard to the John Kelly Awards. What I'm hopefully going to do is to give you a little narrative of my endeavours in regards of universal design for learning and how it has infiltrated and indeed is ever present in my work. In UCD here, I am a lecturer in educational technology and an educational developer. So part of my remit in the Centre for Teaching and Learning is to provide supports to those that teach and that support learning. So hopefully in my own endeavours, by modelling and by direct provision, I actually try and encourage and support colleagues to accommodate and provide opportunity for different modalities of learning within their practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of slides by way of giving me some more structure to my discussion and my presentation for you guys. So bear with me one moment while I just actually call up my slides and share the screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've kind of thought about this, and actually, I suppose in one respect, I'm actually kind of pleased actually that this opportunity is here, because it's given me a means to actually kind of look on my practice in general and to see what it is I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So thank you for the opportunity in terms of actually kind of putting forward this idea. It's a lovely way of actually getting people to think about their practice. So what I've done actually is I've thought about it from what it is, as I say, I do in day-to-day piece, but I suppose my overarching kind of aim here is to highlight the fact that in incorporating universal design for learning and in thinking about that in day-to-day practice, that there are many opportunities to engage with how we teach and engage with different kind of communities, different kind of practices, modalities, approaches, and so forth to incorporate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to talk to the 4 criteria that are the presented here in terms of implementation, impact, recognition. And I suppose what I've done is I've translated those into my own endeavors, and I'll kind of talk to that as we go. So what I'm talking about is how universal design for learning has been incorporated into my day-to-day practice. So there it is in action. I'm talking about the response that I receive from learners, colleagues in this instance, and I'll explain that momentarily. How it is I perceive that I deliver the message, champion universal design for learning in terms of both from our own unit, but also out to the broader community that is UCD. And then to finish up with some reflections on what it is I've done and indeed where it is that I'm going to go with this. Right, so in terms of the kind of speaking to the first kind of criteria in terms of giving you a kind of snapshot of my practice and what that entails. So on a kind of yearly basis, this is what goes on in terms of the workshops that I would do, in terms of who they're aimed at. So obviously the tutors, there is a huge international mix within that kind of cohort that we would see here in UCD. And that's very interesting in and of itself. There's also a tutor module that you see down there. And that is really kind of a little bit of an eye-opener, because you see immediately the needs of the learners from the perspectives of the tutors and what it is that accommodations need to be made therein. In terms of the other modules that I teach, Active Learning, Become a Better University Teacher, they are obviously kind of aimed at faculty and those that support teaching. And in those modules, we have many international members of staff, we have many different disciplines, we have many different kind of cohorts and different modalities that people would use. So by the very nature of it, there's an eclectic and a lovely breadth within those cohorts. The one with the asterisks there that you see, University Teaching and Learning Induction, this is something relatively new, and I'll come to that in the examples later, but this is an open course aimed at our staff and has been designed particularly in a way that is meant to be autonomous and self-directed, but most importantly, it has been made, hopefully, bulletproof in terms of accessibility in addition to the universal design therein. Okay, moving on. What I want to actually kind of, I suppose, try and capture is the fact that since, I suppose, since the inception of my sojourn here in university teaching and learning, we have been teaching, and I have been teaching many different kinds and modalities of ways of delivering information and indeed workshops into particular kind of realms. And what I mean by that is conceptually, we have done everything from flexible learning to inclusive learning to active learning, student-centered. All of these things beget a consideration of what it means to offer choice and opportunity to our learners and how it is that we support that. And in reality, somewhere in the midst of about 2009, 2013, universal design started to come up in conversation. And in fact, my colleagues from the Access Office would be partaking in what we would then do called the induction program. And we had an overarching piece for new faculty whereby we would give them various components in regards to curriculum design, in regards to assessment design, in regards to engaging learners, and indeed accessibility. And I suppose the two kind of came together in that universal design piece, whereby you would suddenly realize that there was a necessity to try and envelope these together and make certain that people were aware not only of what needs to happen in regards to accessibility, but what ought to happen in terms of providing opportunity and supports to all of our learners. And what did that exactly look like? And in reality, I suppose that kind of continuum there that you see on the right of the slide in terms of supporting learning, all of these things come together collectively, cohesively, to provide a universal design framework. And I think that is really kind of obvious as time has gone on. The quote that I have here, I suppose I put that not necessarily for myself, but in terms of the fact that you think you have to try something, but you think you may know, but you don't know it. And I suppose where I'm going with that is that the key piece here is in terms of how it is exactly we wish to engage our learners. What does it mean in that way? And of course, we have to provide multiple modes and multiple means of opportunity for them to actually participate. Sometimes we do that surreptitiously, sometimes we don't think about it, but more and more it becomes quite evident that we have to think about it, we have to plan, we have to construct exactly what it is we're going to do, not only from a modular perspective and a program perspective, but right down to an individual session, right down to an individual activity within that session that may only take 5 or 10 minutes. What exactly is it? Why is it going to happen? What will the learners get out of it? How does it relate to the broader outcomes of the module? And so these things mean that we have to be clearly focused in our mind what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's all about engaging our learners in a meaningful fashion, in a way that they can enhance their own kind of skill sets, that they have opportunity to engage in multiple means and multiple modes in that regard. And obviously it's to support their individual journey. So it's not about my teaching per se, it's about my teaching that facilitates our learners in engaging in that. And that is universal design. That is the opportunity that we hopefully can provide if we do it right from the beginning. So what I'm going to try and do as I kind of move forward is to give you a little bit of a narrative of what it is that I do on a day-to-day basis. And so by that, I mean, I'm not going to focus on any one module or any one kind of workshop. I'm going to give a smattering of practices and pieces that I have. But I will put the caveat in that I do think this through from the very beginning. There is a structure, there is a plan, and it is all about providing multiple means of opportunity to engage and providing the learners with their own kind of direction in that way, to be facilitative in that sense. So what you're going to see is a couple of screenshots from different kind of pieces that I've done. So this particular one was an online workshop during the height of COVID that was all about developing group work and supporting online learners. And I suppose what I'm trying to kind of capture here is the necessity for having clear instructional design, clear kind of obvious directional aids that will engage the learners, i.e. their transparent goals or objectives. And although this is a snapshot from many slides, what really caught my attention from this one is the message in terms of making certain that people know why they're here, making certain that they're welcome, clearly expanding upon what it is that they will do, why they will do it, and how they will do it. Not only providing positive role models, but providing the appropriate examples by which people can relate to and engage in that. And the idea of having plenty of socialization. There's nothing better than having a chat with your peers and colleagues to get a little bit of norm referencing, to get a bit of understanding and appreciation of where different perspectives are, not only from an intercultural, from an economic, or whatever it may be. All of that builds that shared kind of knowledge. And I think that's really kind of important in terms of incorporating the idea of universal design within our practice. And what it means in terms of an online piece and in terms of my learners' interaction in this instance is that not only was I giving clear direction, but the little activities that emerged hereafter in terms of how they engage, they know why they're doing it, they know what's going on and what to be expected. All of that actually just makes it much more engaging. There's an authenticity and there's a practical output for that, which is really important to the learners. What you see here is from the active learning module that I teach. And I suppose the purpose of this little piece is to highlight the opportunity for creativity, the fact that each individual within the module gets to create a project pitch, an opportunity to reflect on their own practice and decide what it is that they wish to do that will help their learners. So this module is aimed at faculty. But again, here we have a clear kind of directional aid. We have the authenticity of the activity. So they're doing this with a mind to knowing that what they're after is to make certain that they're going to do something meaningful for their learners. As it says there in the second line, what is the intended outcome for the learner? Why are you doing this? What is the purpose of this? But also there's a nice little caveat here in terms of reacting to your own ability and recognizing how much you can do within a particular time frame. And I think it's really important to kind of not only provide different opportunities, but to highlight the fact that we need to be mindful of our workload, our kind of workspace, and what it is we can do that is going to be seeded for success rather than be onerous and kind of problematic to not only oneself, but to the learners as well in that instance. Okay, another example. This is from an active learning workshop. And I suppose two things here. Again, it's an online piece. So this is the kind of culmination of a word cloud where everyone was kind of participating and providing different kind of ideas and opportunities. But the message here is actually about assessment choice. What exactly is assessment? What exactly is, and how is it that we can use assessment for learning in a multitude of ways? And it's to get people kind of, thinking outside of the box, to get their creative juices going, but also to recognize that it isn't just about an essay or an MCQ, it's about providing different opportunities, different means and modalities for all of us to engage in a way that is meaningful to me as a particular learner in this instance. How can I demonstrate my skills to the best of my advantage in this manner? Again, this is all about supporting kind of universal design, but it actually promotes success in terms of that endeavor. The thing about this in terms of kind of learner interactions is that, in terms of people engaging with this, once they actually think about this and recognize that, oh my goodness, it's not just the one modality that I'm very familiar with or my discipline is very familiar with. There are so many other different opportunities that I can grapple with and have a go at. This is the thing about kind of sharing ideas and resources in this regard. Okay, another example from the active learning module. What we have here is simply a means to engage. So we have obviously a concept map of some description, and what it does actually is this is actually a map of the module and all the things that they are either doing or about to do. So it actually kind of highlights what comes down the line. And again, that's important for kind of letting learners engage with not only what it is in the immediate, but thinking about the future and planning. Of note here is you can see over on the far right, there is a piece relating to universal design for learning. So when this module first started running in about 2013, they were encouraged to do the digital badge, which was just kind of emerging at that time, or the version of it that was there. And funny enough, this has since moved on to my colleague's module in more kind of concrete fashion, in the curriculum design module. But I suppose it highlights the fact that there are different kind of opportunities to kind of, work in tandem with not only what we do here in teaching and learning, but what the Access and other kind of units do within the university, which is really important to have that, collegial and collective interpretation of embedding universal design and making it known across the board. Okay, another example. This is actually from a tutor induction, I beg your pardon. So this is a little snapshot of a task that we did actually face-to-face, but we were coming out of COVID. And so it was done digitally. But interestingly enough, this would have been in a room of about 120, 130 odd people. And the key concept here is not only to get those people engaged, but it's to actually give them the opportunity to hear their voice. So in this instance, see their voice be captured. So it was actually kind of subsequently kind of thematized kind of left to right. I won't give you the details, but what I would simply say is that the sense of excitement of doing this in session is wonderful with the students or graduate students in this instance by and large, but also it provides multiple means of actually people, kickstarting conversation. So this was only one part of the task, to actually get all of these ideas out. The second part was then to actually come together in smaller groups, having aired their ideas, their thoughts, their fears in some instances. They were then able to, firmly come together and discuss what it was that they were trying to do and how it is they would resolve these. So again, from an empowerment piece and from a kind of a piece of expression, this was a really important tool to use in engaging the learners. And I will say without question that the feedback from the tutor induction is always, absolutely wonderful, but wonderful in terms of people coming back and saying, that was important. I really appreciated having done that activity. And having the opportunity to do that activity within the session is really good. And they weren't expecting that sitting in a lecture theatre, which is also another nice surprise for them to actually undertake. Beg your pardon. So this is an example from the tutor module, and this is simply to actually highlight yet another kind of means of actually kind of student interaction. They're presented with a problem and they are to resolve the problem. In this instance, it's all about grading criteria, and indeed, do they know what that is and how to actually apply it? So it's a problem that they think they know the solution to, but of course, when you dig down into it, biases appear and problems appear that need to be resolved. And how is it that we do this? So the idea is to actually engage people in something that is seemingly okay, but when you dig deeper, it proves to be really tricky to actually kind of disentangle. And there's nothing like hard fun or kind of like a problem to actually engage students in a meaningful way. And again, it's about kind of the, dealing with the threshold concept whereby they struggle, but at the end, they actually realize that, you know what, that was worth it because I now have a better understanding and appreciation of how it is I will work with this. So again, this is another example of engaging students in different modalities. Here's a rather nice example of gamification. This is from the active learning module. And what we simply have here is, again, there is a digital version for COVID times, and there is a face-to-face version to be played on a lovely big laminated board. But in essence, it's all about coming together to problem solve through a game. When people first see this, they are perplexed and puzzled, but when they actually get down to it and follow the rules, they realize that it is actually the most rewarding kind of piece in terms of actually figuring it out. And what happens is people will actually do this iteratively. They will run through it a number of cycles to actually kind of get it refined and actually kind of figure out exactly how it is they're going to implement and work with this. So again, these possibilities, these kind of different modalities offer great opportunity for learners to engage, to share knowledge and to kind of express themselves in a means that they hadn't thought hitherto about. So what I would say is that in every single one of my modules and my workshops, I have a particular modality. What you see here is a little snapshot of things to remind me, really. The blue sheet, as I call them, is a piece that appears after everything I do, workshop, module, or whatever, to remind people this is what we've done, this is what it is you may need to do next. The piece about the timeline is simply to highlight the fact that there are meetings, open office hours to engage, to facilitate, and to discuss things further. And the video link is something that emerged out of COVID that I hadn't expected to be quite as successful as it was, which is basically every time I do a workshop, a session, a module, I create a video synopsis, or indeed a video version of the whole piece. And I do what I've kind of done here. I collate kind of, plenary pieces that would have arisen in session, and I wrap them up into one kind of collective piece. These have proven to be, really kind of powerful for the users, not simply because people may not be in attendance, but as a means to engage with the content in a whole nother way, to look at things in detail, to reflect upon the kind of problems that have been resolved and indeed are still open. And also, actually, interesting enough, which I hadn't realized, is that the international students use them as a collective means to come together and to kind of discuss elements that they thought that needed further kind of exploration, that they, in essence, that perhaps they didn't quite grapple with when we're in session. So that opportunity has opened my eyes extraordinarily so in regard to that. And it's something that I will maintain going forward. So in terms of actually kind of the impact, so obviously the nature of my work in terms of the unit and supporting kind of those that teach here in UCD means that I have a kind of a conduit into all of those individuals, and everything I do hopefully transitions into their own practice. But there are some things that are very kind of clear in their kind of direction and endeavor in terms of reaching out. And some of those pieces are piece about feedback, for instance, and what that means in terms of actually integrating it into your practice and making certain that students know what it is, when it is that they will get it, and how they will get it, and most importantly, how to deliver it. And I suppose the bigger thing about this is not actually providing feedback, but providing feed forward, the opportunity for students to engage with formative assessment activities so that they can develop out their ideas and be better prepared for assessed activities, credit-bearing activities. And this is something that has become very opportunistic in terms of hybrid and blended learning, but it's something that should be ever present regardless, that we provide our learners the opportunity to succeed rather than to redress fails and submissions in that regard. The other thing that I want to highlight is that, again, part of my work is obviously kind of providing kind of opportunities to engage, but I provide an array of open workbooks and materials, as we all do within the unit, both through our website. But what I have done is perhaps taken a little step further, and I've done this for quite some time, which is to create all of my content and my workbooks that I design and use as Creative Commons open attribution. And what this simply means is that anyone can then use them forthwith and adapt them and reuse them as they see fit. That kind of openness and that kind of opportunity means that people engage with the content in a much more open and genuine way. So they realize that, they can actually kind of grapple with something, take it apart and make it work for them and their perspectives. But I suppose the three pieces I highlight here in terms of student-centered learning, instructional module design and assessment principles are in essence kind of, if done well, our code for universal design. And so thus our practice has kind of surreptitiously been preaching, if not kind of directing individuals to consider the broader picture, the broader perspective. And it's really important to actually equate these with what universal design is and how that kind of materializes in one's day-to-day practice now moving forward. Moving back to specific examples, there's a piece in our tutor module, my tutor module that I run that is directly linked to getting students therein to engage with universal design and recognizing what it is, having an appreciation for it first and foremost, but most importantly, to be able to transition their own work within that realm and recognize how it is they can apply the principles. So we have a couple of kind of activities that we will do to engage the cohort and also for them to engage their cohort. So it's all of this thing about thinking from one's own practice perspective and then applying it within a real setting. And the importance of that cannot be underestimated. Again, one of the things that happens within this module is we get to do some practical pieces with the students. And we consider not only the theoretical constructs that we might use, but we consider the physical environment, which is often overlooked, and how that can be a barrier or kind of an issue in terms of actually one's teaching practice and what we deal with that from not only from a facilitative perspective, but also from the learner perspective. And that's really important to having that holistic view in regard to that. And I have to say, this is always an eye-opener for the people on this particular program. Never did they think that they had control over their physical space. And it seems so obvious to be able to say, simply move a chair or rearrange a table, or indeed request another room. But these are the things that need to be done. These are the things that need to be thought about in terms of encouraging full engagement, open engagement, and offering up an environment that is both trusting and welcoming to our learners. That's really important. This is really by way of kind of highlighting the fact that part of my procedural piece within teaching and learning has always been to, stress a couple of home truths. One being the notion of constructive alignment and what it means to design a program, a module, a session in an effective and orderly and indeed structured manner. And as you can see from the triangle on the left, there is embedded in the center there the whole notion, indeed concept of student-centered and inclusive. It is fundamental to what universal design is in terms of providing clear outcomes and objectives, giving assessment opportunities, formative and otherwise, and embedding those into one's teaching practice is really important. Coming back to what I kind of highlighted at the very beginning, the Brightspace Explore module. This is something that I've newly developed this year. We've already had about 80 or 90 kind of participants running through this. This is a self-directed piece that I have done two things with. One, I have obviously thought about it from the perspective of engagement, the individual engagement, how it is they will do that, and the perspectives of kind of running through something autonomously by yourself and trying to grapple with what are the key issues. And in this instance, we've particularly said about, so this is aimed at faculty, we said about looking at my learners, my practice, my assessment approaches, and my professional domain. So putting at it from the individual perspective. But interestingly enough, what I also did was I made this extraordinarily accessible. I reran and ran the Ally score thing to make sure that that was there. So I suppose that's something that we all do by matter of course, but it was interesting to note how many little kind of nuances and subtleties were therein, even though I was trying to be kind of wholly, aware of those situations. And I think that really kind of begs or boils down to what is essential practice and making this happen in that regard. Again, the feedback that's coming through from the participants of this is they like it, they engage with it, they're kind of running through it. And again, there are open questions, there are kind of pieces where I will go back in and contribute and follow up with. And there's been a nice kind of steady kind of flow in this piece. And it's something that we hadn't hitherto thought about, providing kind of self-directed pieces in this manner. So all of these things have kind of opportunity to explore further and indeed develop further in that regard. So where does that bring me? I suppose coming full kind of cycle, there are a couple of things that I suppose want to do moving forward, and indeed am doing. As hopefully you've garnered, my practice by necessity, I hope, begs for a universal design approach, begs for an awareness of who my learners are and how it is I can engage with them. Interesting enough, I did actually initiate a research kind of piece on the active learning module in 2015, and I've been gathering data on that in terms of how people engage with the content and kind of changing the material design therein. And that was based on the principles of universal design behind that. So from the very kind of, first kind of interaction to the endpoint, there is a kind of clear kind of trajectory about what it looks like and all the different kind of modes and modalities. So that module is particularly pertinent in that regard. Through the Centre for Studies for Higher Education, I hope to present that and kind of explore kind of further the whole principles and concepts therein. This is something that is obviously kind of moving forward. Similarly, I am party to a particular Erasmus project at the moment that is collecting experiences from post-pandemic endeavors in terms of teaching and learning and how one reacts and where one goes with that going forward. And that, again, surreptitiously, if not explicitly, encapsulates what it means to design and offer a holistic, a universal, and opportunistic means of engaging our learners from that perspective. Obviously, my teaching piece is ever present in respect of that, and I'm always, as people who know me, forever tinkering and providing additional resources and materials and adapting and readapting my work. And I suppose adaptation is the watchword, how to respond to emerging needs and recognize issues and not necessarily failings, but more kind of opportunistic pieces that can kind of be better done the next time, enhancements. So that's kind of part and parcel of that. The little symbol in the middle is simply to remind me to say that all my materials, all my teaching materials, all my research and materials are attribution only. I really believe in disseminating and sharing that in that endeavor. And I think that's important to perpetuate and encourage people to do likewise in that regard. Finally, this is something that I often kind of put into many of my induction workshops, whether they're for faculty or for tutors or whomever. And I suppose these little maxims are quite kind of relevant in regards to making certain that we know who our learners are and how it is we can respond to them and their particular needs. Again, that's universal design, recognizing the individual, recognizing their own experiential knowledge and leveraging that to the best of their effect. That's universal design. Enabling is a lovely watchword, but more importantly, to be actively engaged, to participate in a multiple means and modes is really important to making certain that learners have the opportunity across a module, a program, to experience and to demonstrate their own experience within that. Manageable units, let's be honest, information bloat overload is far too common, but making certain that we have organized our content both structurally from curriculum perspective, but also from a design perspective in terms of how we present our information, whether that's transcripts, whether that's kind of directions, clear and transparent, whether it's learning outcomes and session objectives. All of these things need to be taken account of. Choice, we all love choice, but having choice in terms of means to, represent my assessment modality, whether that's a video like this as opposed to a written document, that choice is wonderful. It's so empowering and it's so important for the autonomy of the individual learner. But most importantly, the opportunity, if indeed the prerequisite of actually making certain that we know what it is that our learners are going to do, we tell them, and more importantly, we guide them. That facilitative piece. We are only kind of there to help people through their learning journey, and that is the important piece that we need to consider. So what I'd like to say is thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit of my work. It's actually been an interesting process in terms of just kind of thinking about my own processes in regards to universal design. Hopefully you have everything you need. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.